basketball, a foul hall prefect, and part of the Marshall Society. After Mercersburg, she attended Santa Clara University, where she played tennis, earning double majors in biology and public health, along with a minor in anthropology. She is currently located in the Bay Area and works in biotech. With that, Nikki, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And go Marshall, Jen. That's very funny. I haven't had to say that in a while. But thank you for the introduction, other Nikki. I'm really excited to be here. If my college were to ask me to do this, I would probably say no. And I was just saying earlier, I'm really excited that Mercersburg is doing this sort of programming in general. I mean, this would have been super cool when I was there, and I'm glad that the virtual world is allowing for this now. I know this talk is like focused around Black excellence. I feel like that's a lot of pressure. I don't know if I would necessarily say there's a ton of excellence in my life, but I would just like to, I don't know, tell you guys a couple stories and then some of the lessons that I learned from them, and hopefully we can just have an informal discussion afterwards. Yeah, I'm not formal at all, so if you guys want to interrupt me at any point, just raise your hand, unmute, whatever you feel comfortable with. I'm sure the moderators will read them out too if they're in the chat. So cool. All right, I'm gonna share my screen because I feel like some pictures are better than just looking at a Zoom the whole time. Okay, so my talk was titled Being Your Own Cheerleader, because there are three, I would say, very not super connected stories when I was initially thinking about what to talk about, but then that kind of came to be the overall theme in the end. And so we'll see how this ties all back together. But my first story is kind of in the introduction, is around Santa Clara University. So Mr. Sweeney just really embarrassed me by saying I was the best tennis player ever. But when I got to Mercersburg, to Santa Clara from Mercersburg, it was something I definitely wanted to pursue, playing D1 tennis. And I faced, I'd say, a lot more hurdles than I expected to join the team. So I initially was planning on going to a different school. So that was the first thing, kind of pivoting there, because they offered a much better discount at Santa Clara. And then from that, I had gone to a lot of campuses. I'm the first child for my parents, so I'm the tester baby. So we get to drive around most of the US, and at every school I got to have the opportunity to talk to the tennis coach there for the most part, including Stanford, which in hindsight still blows my mind. But this was the one school where I couldn't get in contact with the coach, and I actually toured on the day that they had a match. So he was really busy that day and didn't really get to, I would say, have a lot of FaceTime and, you know, much communication there. But I was like, I really like this school. I'm gonna apply anyways. And then fast forward, I don't know, like however many months, I find out I'm going there. I'm like, okay, cool. The one school I don't have any like contact with the coach is where I'm gonna go. I need to figure this out. So it was the summer before my freshman year. I'd left like a tennis resume and videos and all of these things. Actually, Mr. Sweeney helped me make some of them, which was super nice. Got to calling, emailing, smoke signaling, like anything I could do to try to reach this man, to no avail. And I was just super frustrated because I'm like, I know I can do this. I've been training pretty much since I was a little kid. And I had been practicing with a soon-to-be former coach of the college that is in the town my parents live in, San Luis Obispo, so it's state college. And he's like, you've totally got this. You just need to go to these tryouts and you'll be fine. And that was a huge thing. I couldn't even figure out when the tryouts were because this coach wasn't getting back to me. And it was getting ridiculous. After I think like 2.5 months of that, I was like, all right, if he's not going to talk to me, I'm going to find someone who will. So went through this whole journey through the athletic department to end up talking to the head of the athletic department and be like, hey, I'm just trying to find out when tryouts are. If I make it, that's cool. But if not, like, you can ignore me and move on. But I just want to try. And eventually, I found out that the tryouts were like a month after school was starting officially. So that was also a huge bummer because you need people to practice with to stay sharp for the tryouts. And there weren't that many people available. And I got to know a couple of the girls on the team, but then they were super busy practicing that they didn't really have time to hit with me. So I was just going out and doing all the drills that I could solo, hailing strangers down who they seemed like they could rally with, and doing anything I could to like be ready for this tryout, because I'd been playing probably some of the best tennis right before with the coach from my parents' town. So it's like, I don't want to lose all these things that I've learned. Come to the tryouts, and I don't know, it was a couple of days. First, I had to play with against the girls who were also trying out. So that was pretty fun. Got to meet a couple of them and practice with them in the meantime for the next round. But I would say they weren't much competition either at that point. And so then the coach saw that and was like, okay, now you get to move to the next round of tryouts. And I got to play against the number 4 player at the time. And then I dusted her. So I was like, heck yeah, you've got to put me on this team because there's no way you can't. But the thing was, coach really thought I was going to lose, I think, because this is our team. As you can see, I'm at the end here. Team doesn't really look like me was one thing, but I think kind of was a thing against me. But also, it was a super big team. They like to keep around 8 players. In my year, there were 12. So quite, I would say, a journey to get there. Sorry, it's a little pixelated, but the funny thing was he had 2 other freshman recruits, and neither of them really stayed on past their second year. So I was like, aren't you glad that you had me on your team? But from there, a lot of people graduated. Like I said, I was his 2 freshman recruits quit their freshman and then sophomore years. And so my junior year comes around, our team's a lot leaner. And I'm like, hey, coach, I know other girls in the team who have left had some scholarships and things like that. I dedicate a ton of my time to the team. Being a D1 athlete in any school, I think, is a huge commitment. You have to balance classes and practice and traveling and all of the things that you kind of deal with, I would say, at Mercersburg if you're on any teams or plays and productions and things like that. But I'd say there's a little bit more of a social thing that you're sacrificing when you're doing a D1 sport. And with all of that in mind, I was like, hey, I know I'm holding my own, I'm playing well. Can I get a scholarship or a partial scholarship? Something. I would have taken pretty much anything. And he was like, no, that's not really in the cards right now. And it was just for 1 year because I would have been a senior. And I was like, okay, thank you very much. I valued my time here, but I can see that I'm not valued, so I'm going to move on. And that was a really hard decision because I really loved a lot of my teammates. It was kind of sad to leave them, but I still got to support their home matches and stay in contact with a couple of the girls. But also most of the people I would say I was super close with were older than me. So that made it a little bit easier, but it was still really hard because tennis has been such an integral part of my life for so long. So I traded in my rackets for pipettes because, like they said, I was a double major in biology and public health, which is another thing. All of the other kids didn't have labs on my team, which really take up quite a bit of time. But these turned out to be my new teammates. If you can see this, they were a lot of fun. But that's what my new team became, and got to learn a lot and be doing research for my senior year instead of playing tennis. And it was a great decision on my end, I think, looking back at it. So that kind of led me to my journey into biotech. So I moved a whole 6-minute drive away from where I studied to Genie Technologies, which was a startup that was acquired by Roche right before I joined. So I was part of that expansion of early employees. And it was, as I would say, my first real job. even getting it was kind of a ordeal. I think I was working 3 jobs to stay in the area before I got hired full time. So that was super grateful, really nice, had a wonderful team, and I was just really happy to be there. And I would say there I had a little bit similar, but I would say more varied challenges posed being in that environment. So my team there, I ended up having some really great coworkers that you can see here. I don't know, I was just looking at random photos for this presentation, and these I'd say are my favorite people on the team who are still some of my best friends today. And this is my roommate of, I would slash friend of like 10 years now. And these are 2 of my mentors on either side of me. And they taught me quite a bit, along with one other coworker who was in this photo. But I had, I'd say, quite a bit of turnover in managers in that team and in that role. By the time I left, I think there were 5, if you include the gap of not having anyone there. So my first manager, though, he was quite a treat. This man, I would say, didn't have a great filter, scientific background, or leadership skills. So my first performance review, I was contractor, and in it, I was told, "Hey, Nikki, I know you're really great and really friendly. You seem to like be doing well, but I know you haven't been trained at all or have any skills, and you're just the forgotten redheaded stepchild of the team." And I'm like, "First of all, sir, I am far from redheaded, and I've learned quite a bit," because he was a very, I would say, distant, but not really. He was a distant manager, I would say. So this lady here, she taught me how to do all the sample prep and production and all the things that I ended up doing when I became a full-time employee, and basically expanded everything on that I learned in college, and then taught me so much of the lab skills, QC, production, all of these things, data management, lab management, all of these cool skills. And then this guy here, he taught me how to run our prototype, and I was one of the few people on our team who was consistently doing that for everyone, along with my buddy here. And so when he said that, first I was, processing it as older man saying this to me. I didn't really appreciate it, especially since it wasn't based on much. And then after I let him finish his spiel, I was able to counter with like, "Excuse me, I really appreciate your feedback, but I've learned X, Y, and Z, and I contribute this, and I've increased our baseline production by this, and yada, yada, yada." And he was like, "Oh, I had no idea." And I'm like, "Yes, because the people who are actually managing me are not you." But I said that in a much more polite way, I think, back then. So that was, I would say, quite a learning experience of just being able to, one, take stock of everything that I had learned, be able to verbalize it, and then also just, I don't know, he was kind of a jerk, so standing up to him. He was the first manager of 5 at that point, so he was gone, and kind of had to repeat a lot of these things with the subsequent ones, because, and this is all within a 2.5-year period. So they realized, like, "Hey, you're actually really good at what you do, so you don't get to do the cool experiments, and we're going to keep you here because you're just really efficient with your friend." And after a while of that, I'm like, this is the same thing. I realize I'm not being appreciated, and also not growing in this role, which was the biggest red flag. It's just like, I can do this and go to the movie on Fridays and then come back and still do work, and I'm just as productive as other people on my team. So that led me to make a change, because this cool lady joined a different team called Global Customer Support, and then she brought us with her. So I transitioned out of the lab, sort of, into a different format. So now I'm part of Global Customer Support. I essentially am like the liaison between the lab and our customers. So our customers, this is an example of training I got to do in Shanghai at the end of 2019, super fun. They're the ones who go out in the field and support our products and support our customers, and then I support them. And if there's something I can't help with, I go back to the people who've actually developed it, and also sit on the project teams to kind of guide them to develop things that the customers actually want and will use. So it was definitely a change of role of being stuck in the lab. We used to call ourselves Lab Cinderellas because they'd be like, make this Cinderella, do this Cinderella, and then got to have a lot more autonomy and then move into this role that I'm currently in, or this team that I'm currently in. So that was super fun. A lot of learnings there too. But then after my first year, I had been talking with my manager of like, how do I set myself up for success? How do I move up in this role within this organization and do all of those things? And so one of the things she told me was, hey, we have a site closing in Madison, Wisconsin, but we need people to take over supporting those products because they're being updated. And at the time, it was one manager and one employee, and then I would say like a different employee, but other side of things that I don't really work with. So I'm like, okay, cool. So I went to them, downloaded their brains into mine, and tried to, I don't know, fill this really big set of shoes because they'd been supporting the product line for so long and had a lot of historical knowledge, and just they were, I would say, a little bit older and more experienced. And so I joined a project team that then, and I'm consistently at least like 15 to 20 years younger than all of my peers. So that's also very fun. But I took over for them. I led this training. That was one of the things that was like part of the transition. And I had been part of the project team for I think like 6 months at that point. So my performance review rolls around and I'm like, okay, hey boss, I'm expecting a raise because you say if you take over for this, you'll get to move up to the next role. My friend did, and she was told like, I don't really have visibility into what you're doing because now you don't really like work under my life cycle and don't really report to me. So a lot of the things that I normally get feedback from other people, I don't have. And I was quite upset because I had taken over for 2 people and had done really well. So I went to my gym and destroyed a, what's it called, punching bag for quite a while. Great stress reliever if you guys ever need to do one. Highly suggest kickboxing. But after that, I'm like, I'm going to prove this lady wrong. So that started, I would say, like my 6-month journey to trying to figure out a promotion. And I got into contact with other mentors of mine and just was like, hey, in HR about how do I frame this? How do I approach my manager? Because she's someone I'm really close with. So I think that also made it easier, but also more difficult about like, I expected this, you implied this, and then this is what wasn't the result. So going from that, I started documenting everything that I was doing, from the minutia of like leading this meeting and taking these notes and developing these trainings and just having metrics that I could point to for every single month, for every couple of weeks. And I would, because I had one-on-ones with her during the whole time, she said she didn't have visibility into what I was doing. I'm like, I've been telling you consistently, but now I'm going to do it in writing, and I'm going to get other people to give me feedback on like how to frame this so that you can see everything. And actually, turns out yesterday, I found out that my campaign for the past 6 months was successful. Now I have a now senior version of what I previously was. So that was really nice, because if I wasn't, I was going to tell you guys know when to walk away. But yeah, so I would say there's 3 different scenarios where I had to kind of think for myself and advocate for myself there, and just really take stock of everything that I had done. The lessons I really learned were, you know, there were people who taught me a lot, and to pass that on as well. To, if you see people who need help or are getting looked over, you need to, one, be that person to advocate for them as well, because sometimes it's a little difficult for people to really see they aren't being treated the way that they should be and things like that. So like when my friend pulled me out of the other team, she's like, I know you're not being utilized here and you're not going to grow. That was one. And during the whole campaign with, for this past promotion, one of my friends, she's a project leader and much more senior than me. She had been giving me advice, keeping me motivated, and especially during, I think, last year, because it was, I think, everything else going on, especially socially, it was just hard to really care about work when there's a much bigger social issue going on. And there's another point. So yeah, what I know you guys are all in high school, but even now you guys are learning so many skills. There's so many things I took from Mercersburg, just that you can use in internships and later on when you guys are in the workforce, if you want to do that. Just like right now you're on a team, that's you're able to communicate with others, you're collaborating, you're working towards a common goal, you're achieving things. There's just so many things. I think people undercount their accomplishments and the value that they bring. So I would really just tell you guys to start categorizing that now, taking stock of it, writing things down is super helpful. Definitely helped with I'd say my last campaign, but yeah, there's a lot that I think everyone does and that they don't necessarily think is super impactful, but when you really stop and also get feedback from others and ask them about your performance and what you do and what you mean to them, whether it's like your teammate, your roommate, your teachers, you'll be probably really pleasantly surprised when people will shock you about things that you contribute to them that you don't even realize. So those were my stories. Like I said, not super formal and not, I don't know, they kind of weave together, I hope, for you guys. But if you guys have any thoughts, comments, or questions now, I'd just like to open it to discussion because this is my unamused puppy. But yeah, the floor is everyone's now, I would say.
I just want to say thank you, Nikki, for sharing your story.
Yeah, no problem. Like I said, I don't necessarily know if this was a ton of excellence, but it definitely helped me realize that even if you are doing a lot, sometimes people aren't necessarily listening or paying attention, and that you need to be that person to kind of, be your own hype man, even though it feels kind of awkward sometimes. But I think once you start getting comfortable doing that, it's a lot easier just going forward, one, speaking up for yourself and then speaking up for others as well when you see things happening. So, yeah.
Nikki, well, this is Jason. While I'm glad you were able to talk about your successes, it was interesting. You said, if that didn't work out, I would have talked about knowing when to walk away. Where do you find? How do you find? You've had all successes. Or you only talked about your successes, but maybe you can talk a little bit about that, knowing when to walk away.
Yeah, well, I think the first story, I think, was kind of demonstrated that a little bit. And when I'd asked for some sort of like scholarship for tennis.
Okay, I don't totally get that though. When you're doing sports in high school, aren't you doing it because you enjoy it? Like, seems
yeah.
If you just walk away because you're not getting a scholarship, you probably didn't enjoy it to begin with, or I don't know if I'm not getting it right.
No, I'm not saying even you're in high school and you're not getting a scholarship in high school, don't do it. That team had a lot of, I would say, internal politics was one thing. And then also I could see that I had other opportunities, such as going to that lab. And so for me, I would have probably not been able to sleep most nights with the amount of work of like working in lab, doing classes and doing tennis. And so for me, I chose like, I'm going to either because I'm going to get compensated in lab, and I just want to see what my coach will say and hopefully recognize all that I contributed to that team, because I'd been one of the leaders on that team for the past year when I'd asked him for a scholarship. And I still love tennis, and I really love tennis. And so for me, it wasn't about my love of tennis. It was really like dedicating all of my time and energy to a team that wasn't appreciating me, or coach, I would say. And then also seeing that there's another opportunity that was available and where I would have more chance to grow and learn there. So, yeah.
Nicolette, thank you so
Okay,
much
thank you.
for sharing. My name again, Jamil Myrie, class of '93. I've served on the Board of Regents for over 2 decades, and now my son is a freshman there, and it's a whole new role for me. But just wanted to say thank you so much for sharing. I just took some notes. I'm not going to go through all of them, but first and foremost, I keep hearing you say, like, I don't know about this excellence thing. Let me be the first to affirm you are a shining star of excellence in what you are doing, in all of the travails that you've overcome. And you dropped so many nuggets, so many gems tonight. Like, my screen's on fire. So the thing about the sports, D1, I played tennis, but I also played basketball at Harvard. And I know what it's like to have to walk away because you're not getting the support and you're not getting the value that you're hoping for or that you would look for in your coaches. And I just sort of like wanted to echo on that, because it's a decision. College is one of those next stages or phases in your life where you're making these real life decisions that impact the way that you want to live your life going forward. And so it's about your joy at the end of the day. I love the sport, but I don't love it playing for this coach. Like, this coach is a jerk. And it sounded like that's what your coach was like. And it wasn't about the scholarship, it was more about the principle and, just your joy. And it's like, how do you want to spend your time ultimately at the end of the day? So props to you for stepping up and knowing your worth and just saying, you know what, I can do something else, because, that's just what I can do. Something that my question, I don't want to get lost here, but my question, your practice of just perseverance and holding others accountable for the roles that they sit in, where did that come from? Because that is such a like essential skill that, frankly, a lot of folks don't know and don't learn until they're much, much older. And you learned that and you practiced it really from the very beginning. So, like, where did that come from?
I don't know if I would say righteous anger was a lot of it. I think for, like, I don't know, within like the tennis coach thing, yeah, I think it was not a good sign that every practice my goal was to hit him with a ball. Like, I was successful sometimes, it was great, but like that, I think that, I don't know, just for that, it was knowing that I could do these things and that I was winning in positions, and just, I don't know, I mean, like, the results spoke for themselves, and I was always raised like, you do the work speaks for you. And I think it was realizing that wasn't necessarily the case on that team, and especially in the corporate world. I think a lot of times if you put your head down and you start doing things, so people just throw more, like, shovel more on your load. And that didn't really sit well with me, because one, as like a young woman and also a Black woman, I was just like, I can see that other people are getting opportunities from complaining, and this is not how I was raised. But at the same time, I'm not going to let other people get opportunities that I'm not offered just because I'm diligent and do my work. So I think I was just getting frustrated by seeing that, and was like, well, nothing's going to change unless I use my voice. So kind of just forced it out of me. So
One other quick thing I wanted to say, just more battery fuel in your back. You're a Black woman in biotech in Silicon Valley. Like, I don't know if a lot of the students here know what that actually means. I mean, first, to be a woman in Silicon Valley, but then also to be a Black woman in Silicon Valley. Like, you're like 0.005% of the population, you know, like, real talk, in the Bay, in Silicon Valley. That's like insane. So excellence, yes, you are it. So props to you, fire all over. I'm done.
Yeah.
Hey, Nikki, I was going to say, I think, well, something that I was just reminded of, your mom doesn't take any crap from anybody. And I think that some of that may have rubbed off on you. Just hearing some of the things that she gets what she wants, I think, pretty much when she goes into a situation, she just doesn't take anything. I was going to ask you alluded to something when you were talking. You alluded to the protests in the summer and all the stuff that was going on. I guess you were probably talking about the Black Lives Matter movement and all the things that happened there. Have you been active there at all? Talk about your involvement in the Bay Area, if you might.
Yeah. For me, I was very conflicted because I think when things are happening, but if I don't know, there's just such a range of emotions, like anger, depression, despair, anger, all like the whole cycle. Like I think it's exhausting just being Black in America because you have to grieve for all of these strangers who could be your family, you know, on a very regular basis. And I think being home and this being public and also a repeat of Eric Garner was just like, it was a lot. So I attended a couple of protests, but the conflicted part for me was we're in the middle of a global pandemic, and knowing that I didn't want to put people at risk by being around them, and because I was still going into the lab at that point and had other contact with people, and I know everyone was wearing masks and things like that, but I also still saw my partner's parents pretty regularly, so then having to quarantine between those was quite difficult. And so for a while, it also just seems like a very overwhelming problem that being at a protest it felt good, but also the change wasn't tangible there for me. And so I started I just donated to all these things because that's one thing I can do virtually that was really easy. And, you know, people can use my money much better than me in that space, and then they're putting their bodies on the line. And then the other thing that I did was try to start inflicting change where I have a direct contact and impact with people. So that was actually another thing that happened that was quite, I don't know, I would say a little bit stressful. So, you know, the protest had gone on. I'm part of a Swiss company, technically, but we have, you know, many offices within the US. And going to work and just, you know, smiling and pretending like things were normal was just, it was a lot. It was really difficult. Thankfully, we have CD meetings, so you can have 10-minute breaks to cry if you need to. But no one was really saying anything. And so I was really frustrated and decided to write the head of our division a really long letter explaining, I would say, the sentiments that the 2% of his employees were feeling, and listed a bunch of resources and just tried to get a conversation going with him. And I think, and my mentor who helped me, I'd say, fight for this promotion, she's also a Black woman and she's high up. And so she was really supportive, but then also was like, hey, this is great. You're saying so many things so well and so controlled, but also like, I'm really nervous for you. Like this can affect your career here, and like you can potentially be fired and like all of these things. So she would kind of flip flop, and then I knew I was going to send it regardless, but just going over that and crafting it so it was something that people would actually listen to and I would get to him, that was, I'd say, one big thing. And so, yeah, I've been trying to just affect change around me. And thankfully, I'm still in my job. And like, if I didn't, again, it would be the knowing your worth thing of being able to walk away from a company that doesn't value employees of color. It was a little bit more difficult in the middle of the pandemic, though, because, you know, jobs aren't just lying around these days. But I'm also part of the African Americans in Biotech group that we have, and then just trying to do things there, and part of all the other subgroups within my work and things like that. So trying to affect change where I can, because I don't know, I think tackling systemic racism as an individual is a little much.
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
Nikki, I'm curious about something.
What's up, Coco?
I'm gonna call you Nikki, and I'm not gonna.
That's fine.
About it. So, when I first logged on, you said something about how if Santa Clara asked you to do the same thing, you probably wouldn't do it, or you might not do it. Why not? Like, what's the difference? What's something that would make you hesitate compared to whatever, or what's something about Mercersburg that makes you say there's no doubt that you're gonna do this? I was curious.
Well, one, I feel like the students are much more appreciative and like focused when in these types of settings. I'd say Santa Clara, I love the school, it was great, but I don't think they would ever do anything like this is the other thing. Like I don't know, they pull people out for like photo shoots, but they don't really do much to support their Black students very often. Is something that I've seen. And even this summer, there was an incident on the campus where a Black professor was entering her faculty housing and her brother was on campus. And then entered her housing, and because he was visiting her, and it had been like all summer. And the campus safety were like, you don't belong here, you're a Black man in our faculty housing, and stopped him, harassed him. She came out, she had her faculty ID, things like that, tried to, calm the situation, still didn't really do much. And then it wasn't until her husband, who is of a paler complexion, came out, that they actually really started to listen. And then also, like, her neighbor heard the commotion, who's a white professor, and then he came out. It's like, I've called campus safety in to let me into my house because I didn't have my ID on me, and they did it without question, and we were joking that this could be a perfect crime. So there's just things like that. I think that was probably like the most recent example, but just, I don't know, there's different focus, and I feel like authenticity around these sort of things within Santa Clara than I think Mercersburg does a better job with. So, yeah. Disappointing. That was 2020, and you would think that at this point we should have more compassion and understanding, but hopefully the world is trending towards that. Any student questions? I'm sure you guys had to overcome stuff. You're all doing school virtually. That must be a pain.
I'm just wondering about, given a hypothetical situation where you had a different tennis coach in college, one who was much more supportive, how would that have affected the rest of your years in college? Like, you mentioned it as a situation where you had to step away and realize that, it was kind of like a sinking ship and you had to walk away.
Wait, I thought the tennis thing was in high school because she said she was dealing with, because how do you get a scholarship if you're already in college?
The scholarship, the tennis thing was in college.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. Like walk away for something if you're not getting a scholarship in college. I thought you were talking about high school.
I don't know if Mercersburg, I guess you guys do that, but yeah. I don't know. I think for me, having a different coach, like Mr. Sweeney and Mr. Hicks here, like they were just so supportive and really taught me an environment of like what a team could be and should be. And I think that would have honestly changed my entire perspective on it. I think I still would have been really conflicted and wanted to pursue something with science and with one of my professors, but it was really easy in the end, I would say, to walk away because I don't know, all of the time and effort was not recognized. And I think just also the general environment I was around, like I was still the walk-on even when I was on the team. And so like anytime someone came late to practice, like Nikki, go warm them up, or Nikki, go do this. And like I paid my dues and I understood it was part of being a freshman as well. But then I think similar kind of things like that happened as I was older in the team too. And I was like, this isn't really the environment I want to be in. I had really supportive assistant coaches, and I think one of them leaving to go be a head coach of a different program was also part of the reason it was easier to walk away, because they had been the people supporting me.
I guess what I was trying to ask is, rather than having to walk away, if you had a more supportive coach, it would have been what sounds like a sacrifice, making a sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
So I was wondering if you could talk about some of the sacrifices you've had to make throughout your career.
For college or professionally? Sorry.
Really, like whether it be college or professional, I'm just wondering, because it sounds like with your career, your professional career as well, there were a lot of situations in which, the ship was sinking once again and you kind of knew when to step off. But were there any sacrifices you had to make where you were kind of deliberating between two options and you just had to go with your gut?
Well, for me, there's also like professionally, it's always saying like if there's opportunities outside of the company I was working with, I transferred to completely different teams which didn't interface. But so it felt brand new. But that was one thing, is evaluating other offers I got. And the other thing, I think it all really came down to people. It was really hard leaving a lot of my teammates in sample prep. I knew people were relying on me because I was doing really well, and then it would have been a lot for my manager at the time to onboard new people, and we just gotten really close. And then I think also just realizing wouldn't be there to support her personally, which I was doing a lot of at the time as well with my one colleague, that was a little bit difficult. But I think in the end, you also have to realize like when your growth is going to be impacted, and like if you're not learning and you're not growing and you're not happy, then you're not going to be 100% and be able to help other people achieve those things as well. So I think it's just really like recognizing that. I mean, I don't know. I think it's a little bit easier leaving jobs too the older you get. But we'll see. I've only really had two. Actually, looking at everyone on this screen, and there's like 4 of my teachers who've been there for 10 years, it's probably not easier in Mercersburg because I think that's a very different environment. But in the Bay Area, there's a lot of opportunities, and I would say there's a lot, depending on where you end up, there's a lot less focused on.
Are you saying there are more opportunities in the Bay Area than there are in the Mercersburg area, Nikki?
In biotech, definitely, I would say that. If I ever wanted to be a teacher, I would have been in Mercersburg like right after I graduated. But
seems bold, Nikki. That claim seems bold.
Yes, I know. Do you guys get more stoplights there?
Yeah, like there's so many different types of cow poop you can go into.
That's true. I don't know. Mercersburg is a very special place, so it does create this thing that I guess would be much more. That was actually harder, I think. Leaving Mercersburg was probably one of the hardest transitions I had. And then before going to school, because I had such a good network of like friends and teachers and coaches and things like that. It was, I think, also comparing, you know, you have to have a baseline. So like my baseline of like leaving that school versus leaving Santa Clara versus leaving a position, it's like those things relatively were not as difficult. So I think that also informed the decision.
Other student questions?
I was wondering what your thought process was like before you officially decided, like, okay, I want to walk away from this and this isn't like the best place for me to be. Was it kind of difficult, or did it take you a long time to really realize that, or were the nerves kind of like holding you back for a while?
I think the realization comes a lot faster than the actual action does. So you can realize it and things get really comfortable. It's like, oh, I have a job. Like I said, I had gone from like working 3 jobs right before getting hired to like just one. I'm like, oh, this is so comfortable. This is really nice. I can do my job really, like, it's not challenging, which was kind of nice because it gave you free time to do other things, like socialize with people in lab. But then you realize like this is really boring and I'm not growing here, I'm not learning here. And even with that, it takes a while to figure out what those next steps are. Like for me, I had the example of like my one teammate moving, and then she got to travel all the time. She got to interact with people, like have socializing being part of her job essentially, and like talking to people and doing all of these things. So I kind of got lucky and I was able to see someone else transition and show me what was possible. But yeah, it was difficult because there are a lot of the things I was qualified to do externally would have been the same thing, just at a different company. So I knew I didn't want to be in lab forever. So figuring out what those next steps were definitely difficult. And it took like 6 months. So yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions? Hi, Holden.
Nikki, my question is, if you and Jay Myrie took on Mr. Sweeney and me in doubles, who do you think would win? Like that would be the battle of the century right there.
Just hit it to me. You guys would win easily. Just hit it to me.
I don't know. It's Jamil's telling me he plays, but I've never seen. So this is a tough one. Give me some tapes and I'll let you know.
Jay's good. He's really good.
All right, I'm gonna put money on us then.
I'm an old man now, though. The joints are hurting. It's not. I'm an old man now.
They're older.
They're older. I know. I know.
Well, I don't know. Is Eric Hicks actually older? I don't know.
Eric Hicks is like what was that thing? The Benjamin Button. Yeah, in reverse.
The joys of titanium. That's all.
The knee?
Hip. The hip.
Gotcha.
I would say a fairly high percentage of Nikki's tennis matches went like this. She would go out there, she would trade games with her opponent for the first 4 games. So it would be like 1-all, we get to 2-all, and then she wouldn't give the other player another game the entire match. She would just feel them out, then she'd be like, okay, I know exactly what I need to do to beat this person, and then she would just do it, and that would be lights out. It would be 6-2, 6-0. That would, match over. I have the records to prove it too.
I should have just had my coach call you, Mr. Sweeney. And I'd be like, oh, no problem.
Any other?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Sorry, I can't turn my video on. What would you recommend to your 10th grade self Like just some advice.
10th grade self. I was a new student in Mercersburg, so probably a lot. Like maybe not make friends with PGs your first year. That would have been like, that's heartbreaking. But also, it's like, I don't know. I think Mr. Sweeney kind of alluded to it. Like my mom is, she's a badass, like strongest woman I know. And I've got 50% of her in me at least. So, you know, you can accomplish a lot. You got to put your mind to things and honestly, just don't be afraid to try things. I had a really great time. Holden definitely has one of those. Yeah, just go out and do things. And, you know, it's okay to fail, but at least you try, you know. That's what I always told my 10th grade self.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Nikki, we really appreciate you being here with us tonight. I think that, you know, your message is a good one. Self-advocacy is something that is so hard to develop, and sometimes it takes age for you to develop that, but the sooner you do in life, I think the better off you are, because, you know, like you said, nobody's going to take up for you like you are. So you need to stand up for yourself, and you need to do what's best always. So we just appreciate you, and thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you to all the guests who came.
Yeah, it's really nice to see so many people.
Thanks, Nikki. We'll see you soon, I hope, in person.
Good to see you, Nikki.
Someday.
Take care. Say hi to your parents.
I will.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
You.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
You already.